Welcome to the LeadrPulse Podcast, the podcast with actionable insights for leaders revolutionizing the world of work. I'm Holly Tate, your host and Chief Marketing Officer here at Leadr. In today's episode, we're releasing the full raw interview between Chris Heaslip, our Executive Chairman and co-founder here at Leadr, and Geoff Lewis, who's one of our investors and the founder of Bedrock. So take a listen as Chris and Geoff unpack what it means to be a mission-driven entrepreneur and not putting your identity in the success of others.
All right. Well, hey, everyone, thanks so much for joining us this week on the LeadrPulse Podcast. I'm fortunate to be joined by one of the best VCs, not VCs in the whole world, Geoff Lewis. Geoff, thanks for spending a little time with us.
Thanks so much for having me, Chris. It's great to see you again.
Likewise. So something that you and I have gone backwards and forwards about, chatted about a little bit in private is you've had a chance to work with some phenomenal leaders, and one of the traits that they all seem to have is this kind of ability to lead people, inspire people through being mission driven. How did your kind of worldview around that come about, and what is it that attracts you to these mission driven entrepreneurs?
Sure. Well, being a mission-driven entrepreneur yourself, Chris, I think I think that we probably share a view that it's so difficult in the world to get a group of folks aligned, moving in the same direction, working cohesively, harmoniously together on anything, that I think for a new company, which what we do at Bedrock is we focus on new companies, technology companies in their very earliest days. We are trying to do something de novo, something that hasn't necessarily been done before, and to actually catalyze the sort of critical mass of talented folks that you need to catalyze. I think that your best shot is to have a really authentic mission, something you're really trying to achieve in the world, that you believe as an entrepreneur, and your sort of first few folks around you working with you believe really will make the world better. And you know, I think I landed on the importance of investing in mission-driven companies, quite honestly, through trying to build a non-mission-driven company in my 20s when I was a lot younger, had a lot less experience in the world in business. And we were trying to build a business that, you know, made some money, had some customers. It was a enterprise SaaS product that was selling to hotels and airlines. But there was really no greater mission around that business. There was no way that I, as the entrepreneur, I, as the CEO, could articulate, this is how our company was called Top Guest. This is how it's going to make the world better. I didn't have an answer to that question. And it was a slog. It was a real struggle. And building these companies is so hard, regardless of whether or not you have a mission. You might as well have a mission that is real, that is authentic. So yeah.
And how have you seen folks do that if you're taking on a boring old space like payroll or something like that? How do you attach this kind of greater purpose to maybe what seems like an antiquated and old space? Because imagine a lot of people watching are like, well, it's kind of easy to do if you're, you know, trying to send someone to Mars or you're trying to invent a new healthcare device. But, you know, we sell garage doors. Like, how do we, you know, kind of create that greater sense of mission?
Yeah, I mean, it's always idiosyncratic to the company and to the entrepreneur. I'd say that let's just take HR software as sort of an example, given you know, Leadr is just a company that I believe really is a mission-driven company. We're invested in some other businesses in the HR space that I similarly believe have missions, but the missions are all different. And so I don't want to speak for you, but how would you articulate Leadr's mission?
Well, yeah, we exist to help managers become leaders, basically, right? So not just, you know, leading through some principles, but actually truly caring about people. And if you care about people, then in return, they're going to walk over hot coals for you.
Exactly. And leadership, I mean, the world is dependent on strong leaders. Society is dependent on strong leaders. Human flourishing is dependent on strong leaders. So through the narrow focus on building and empowering leaders through your software, I think you have taken what could be seen as, a sort of enterprise SaaS company and made it truly mission driven. Analogously, we have another company that we've invested in at Bedrock in the HR space, which is focused on, the mission is really narrowly focused around reducing administrative work within an organization, like stripping out unnecessary administrative work and automating it. And that kind of ladders up for us at Bedrock and for that company to a mission around like trying to enable more human flourishing. Like if as a manager or an employee, you're spending less time filling out paperwork, less time doing rote administrative tasks, you can live a better life. The organization can be more functional. So I think that even if the sector is very doesn't seem to lend itself to a mission, it's really the onus is on the entrepreneur to figure out what's authentic for them as a mission. Like I've never started a garage door installation company or an HVAC company or a landscaping company, but I can think of missions that these companies could have that are really authentic. I mean, landscaping makes the world more beautiful. I think that's a very noble mission. The garage door is working. Families are so busy these days. Mothers, fathers have so much on their plates. If the garage door is not opening, that can cause an issue. So I think
keeping them safe, right?
Yeah.
Like keeping the family safe. If your garage door's not working, bad guys get in your house.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. I love that. And I've heard you express it before, not just around, for leaders, but also as you think about funding companies, that as people's day-to-day needs get more met, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, hey, people have food and warmth and shelter and these things. Over time, a mission for a company is going to become a massive differentiator for where people are choosing to work and where talent is going to kind of aggregate. Explain that some more, because I think that's a really insightful observation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you're working in an organization that doesn't have a strong mission, the culture inside the company, I think somehow becomes over time, and it could take many years, but very internally political, very internally self-referential around the different individual people or the different factions of people or the different sub-organizations. So if you're not able to sort of self-actualize professionally through the company's mission, it just becomes all about you as an employee or as a team member, and all about like how you feel and how you compare yourself to the other people around you. And I think that can lead to lots of conflict in organizations and a lot of dysfunction in organizations. Whereas if you actually have a mission that your team is authentically bought into, because you as the entrepreneur, you as the CEO are the gatekeeper of that mission, the torch holder of that mission, it takes the focus away from the individual. It makes it about the greater purpose of what that company is trying to do. And I think it is a way to have people be much happier and avoid conflict within organizations. So I do have this feeling that the mission-driven companies just endure much, much, much longer than companies without a real authentic mission. You can even take something like Procter & Gamble, a huge old school company, where I actually started my career as a college intern and for a few years after college. And they make obviously like Tide laundry detergent and Bounty paper towels and all sorts of products like that. They do have an authentic mission around trying to improve life in small ways for families. And it's drilled into you as a summer intern, as a worker at one of the plants. Like there is real alignment within that, 100,000 plus person organization behind the mission. And that company's been around, I think, for something like 100 years at this point. So I think it really does make a difference and can lead to durability.
Let me ask you for a spicy take. If you think about Tesla, are they just trying to shill another car, or do they really actually want to make the world a cleaner, greener place?
Well, I think that I haven't spent a ton of time digging into the organizational psychology at Tesla, but I do think that SpaceX, the other major Elon company, is definitely mission driven. So
Sure.
SpaceX for sure, their mission is Mars and making humans interplanetary. And I believe that Elon really is the torchbearer of that mission and believes in it. Tesla, I'm a little less sure on that, to be honest with you.
I was just picking an example, but like in this vein, like you've kind of defined, hey, we're not VC, because just being a VC, investing money to make more money to kind of buy another house or whatever, like that's not a really transcendent mission. Like, how do you reframe that for your team and for people interacting with you? Because I think you don't only just believe this, like you've done it at Bedrock.
Thank you. Yeah, like our ethos is the world really doesn't need more venture capital firms. Venture capital is a profession where you're not really building anything yourself. You're a provider of financing to entrepreneurs like you. You, Chris, are a builder. You're building organizations. You have teams. I'm not a builder. I mean, I've built Bedrock, but I'm not an entrepreneur building and operating an operating company in the world. And I think that one of the issues with venture capitalists is because you're not actually building a company, but you're in close proximity to folks who are, by virtue of like what you're doing, giving them capital, sometimes serving on the board of directors, advice, etc. You can get into a dynamic with the entrepreneurs where you as an investor are trying to self-actualize through their businesses, which can lead to you being, frankly, really annoying and actually destroying value as opposed to helping to build value. Like if you're trying to leech off of the journey of an entrepreneur or like be parasitic for your own personal brand off of the hard work of an entrepreneur and their team, that's, I think, very unhealthy spiritually as a human for a VC. I think it's very unhealthy for the organization. And so we've just put a line in the sand from sort of day one here of our ethos is, yes, we are technically venture capitalists, like we are making investments in technology companies, but we don't call ourselves that. We're investors. We aren't about status. We aren't about self-actualizing through the companies. We are just about trying to find the very few entrepreneurs on the planet who we believe are going to be building companies that are truly going to make the world better, that are authentically mission-driven, and be providers of capital to them. And that's our ethos here.
That's incredible. I mean, something you've described there as a leader, it can't be easy to not attach your own self-worth to the success of your entrepreneurs, because that's kind of what you're effectively describing is, look, I backed this entrepreneur, look how great I am. But as you're saying, the entrepreneur's doing the work. And I think there's a lesson there for every leader about humility, and by being the provider of capital to entrepreneurs who don't need anything from the entrepreneur in return, that puts you in a category of one, essentially.
Thank you. Yeah, I know there's this old saying passed down in my extended family of if you give a donkey money, it's still a donkey. And what I pulled away from that is it's still just a donkey. And what I pulled away from that is really, I think as an investor, you want to be self-actualizing through things outside of your work. And
Right.
Our mission at Bedrock is very focused on entrepreneurs pursuing unique N of one missions of their own. We're obviously trying to generate exceptional returns for our underlying investors, but the money is not why we're in business, which I think is different from the.
You described it in a recent interview. You said there's probably only about a dozen people who can do what you do, or people who can back truly generational companies. Why do you think that is?
It's so much about in the earliest days where we're getting involved, it's really about underwriting the human beings starting the businesses and really understanding them as people, what makes them tick, how they're going to self-actualize in the world through their mission, with the company they're trying to build. And in order to do that effectively, it's kind of like part psychologist, part finance, part having a vision of like the future and figuring out whether this product is going to serve an end market that's going to be a lot bigger in the future, part private investigator of kind of learning about all the different pieces of how this entrepreneur or set of entrepreneurs is going to put things together. So it's kind of like polymathic. It's very interdisciplinary. It's not something that you can really learn in a classroom. It's something that you have to sort of learn really through just being exposed to lots of different entrepreneurs and having a high EQ, which not many people in finance have. I think finance generally tends to attract somewhat mercenary, robotic, derivative people. And so there aren't that many folks who are drawn to venture capital who also have this incredible EQ and ability to understand other people, empathize with them, really put yourself in their place, that also then have the ability to do what we try to do here, which is say, you know what, we're not going to self-actualize from this investment. We're going to step back. We're going to let this entrepreneur and this team do their thing. And I think that's kind of the formula you need to be one of the very best venture capitalists. So there just aren't that many people that have that.
That's leadership 101 right there, right? Is like, hey, you can't arrive at backing the next Apple or SpaceX or just through analysis on a spreadsheet. There's a lot of other things that go into it. And I think a lot of leaders make that mistake of saying, here's my plan of how to go from A to B on a spreadsheet, but there's real life people involved in actually helping make the plan work. And there's a lot of complexity and, you, as a leader, you can't just kind of boil it down to, black and white. There's a lot of challenges along the way. Let me ask you this, we're at time here, but Geoff, going back to Geoff 20 years ago, stepping into a startup, what advice would you give yourself as a leader back then on how to lead people more effectively?
Yeah, I think that erring on the side of high trust is actually the way to lead. Is you have to actually trust and empower the people on your team. And if people mess up, you have to give people chances to course correct. You have to give clear feedback. And then ultimately, if things aren't working, you have to unfortunately let folks go. And that's part of being a leader. But starting out with a foundation of trust, like when you've made a decision of bringing someone onto your team, imbuing that person with trust is really important. And I think when I was younger, I had maybe some trust issues, maybe that trace back to my childhood. It was hard for me to trust people. And I could have actually been more trusting than I was early on.
That's incredible advice. Well, Geoff, thank you so much for your generosity and sharing your story with us. And we will chat again soon.
Thank you for having me, Chris. Always a pleasure.
Awesome.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the LeadrPulse Podcast. We'd love to hear from you. What actionable insights are you taking away from today's conversation? You can email us at hello@leadr.com. That's hello@leadr.com. You can also pick up Matt and Chris's book, Management is Dead, where we go deeper into these concepts of what does it look like for people to not be managed, but instead led and developed? Because we believe that people development is what drives performance. So check out our website at leadr.com, that's LEADR.com, where you can subscribe to LeadrPulse, our weekly email update where you can hear all about our podcasts and all that we're up to here at Leadr. We'll see you next time.